I bought an old house last year, one of those creaky, too cheap to make sense deals that you just know has a history. But I was desperate, and the place had a strange charm to it. The floors groaned, the walls whispered in the wind, and sometimes at night, I swore I could hear faint shuffling somewhere beyond the walls. But old houses make weird noises, right? I convinced myself it was nothing. Until I found the room. I was rearranging furniture in the guest bedroom when I knocked a bookshelf too hard against the wall. The impact made a hollow sound, a very hollow sound. Confused, I knocked again. The noise was different from the rest of the wall. Something was behind it. I should have stopped there, called a contractor, let someone else handle it. But curiosity has always been my worst trait. It took a crowbar and a lot of effort, but eventually the section of the wall gave way, revealing a doorway. There was no door, just a dark, yawning space that seemed to breathe cold air. My stomach twisted as I peered inside. It was a room, a hidden room that should not have been there. Inside, the walls were covered in old, decayed wallpaper that had once been white but was now sickly yellow. The floor was coated in dust, yet something about it felt off, like it had been recently disturbed. But the worst part? The entire back wall was lined with mirrors. Tall, thin mirrors, side by side, reflecting the empty room back at me. Except, I wasn't in the reflection. I stared at the mirrors, my breath caught in my throat. The room was there, perfectly replicated, but I wasn't. The doorway behind me was reflected, the dust-covered floor, the dim glow of the hallway light stretching into the forbidden space. But I was missing. My legs locked in place as my mind struggled to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe the mirrors were dirty. Maybe the angle was weird. Maybe dash. Then something moved. Not in my reality, in the reflection. I saw it, a figure stepping into the room. It moved cautiously, its posture eerily familiar, as if it was the one discovering the room for the first time. And then it stopped, right where I was standing. My breath hitched, and the air in the room seemed to thin. I wanted to run, but my body refused to obey. The figure in the mirror slowly lifted its head. I couldn't make out a face, just a horrible absence where one should be. Then, as if noticing my presence, it tilted its head. And then it smiled, a grotesque, jagged grin that stretched impossibly wide. I stumbled backward, crashing into the wall behind me. The sound must have startled the thing because its head snapped toward me, though I wasn't in the reflection. But somehow it knew I was there. And then it started moving toward the glass, not just in the reflection. Something moved behind the mirrors. I heard the faintest scrape of something pressing against the other side, a soft, deliberate sound, like fingers dragging against the glass, testing for weakness. I ran. I don't remember how I got out of that room. I don't remember boarding up the entrance, but I must have, because when I came back to my senses, I was standing in the hallway, hammer in hand, breath coming in ragged gasps. I tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, that stress and exhaustion were playing tricks on me. But last night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. The shuffling. The soft, patient scrape of something dragging its fingers along the wall. Testing. Waiting. And when I worked up the courage to glance at the mirror across my bedroom, just for a second, I saw something impossible. The reflection of my bedroom door. It was open, but in reality, it was still shut.
Last month, I moved into a century-old house on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place that realtors sell by calling it full of character. creaky floors, dimly lit hallways, and a basement that smelled like mold and regret. I was told the house had been empty for years, but I didn't ask why. I just wanted an affordable place to live. The basement was a nightmare from the start. Damp concrete walls, a single flickering bulb, and a feeling that you weren't alone. But it was the only place with enough space to store my boxes, so I made peace with its bad vibes. At least I thought I had, until the night I found the door. It started with the noise. A faint scraping sound like fingernails dragging across wood woke me up at 2:13 a.m. I brushed it off as the house settling, until it happened again the next night, and the next. Finally, I grabbed a flashlight and headed down to the basement, determined to find the source. The scraping was louder in the basement, coming from behind one of the walls. I followed the sound and noticed something strange. One part of the wall had seams that didn't match the rest, as if it had been patched up hastily. The more I stared at it, the more it looked wrong, like it didn't belong there. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed a crowbar and started prying at the seams. The drywall gave way easily, revealing a small wooden door about 3 feet high. It had no handle, just a series of strange carvings burned into the wood, symbols that looked ancient, almost alive. I felt sick just looking at them, but the scraping sound had stopped, and the silence was worse. I should have left it alone. I should have turned around, walked back upstairs, and sealed that wall forever. But something about the door pulled at me, like it wanted to be opened. I reached out, and the moment my fingers touched the wood, the carvings began to glow. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a pitch-black tunnel that stretched far beyond the boundaries of my house. The air that spilled out smelled of decay and something metallic, like old blood. My flashlight flickered as I aimed it into the darkness, and that's when I saw them. Handprints. Hundreds of them, pressed into the walls of the tunnel. They weren't painted or carved. They were scorched into the stone, each one larger than the last, as if something was crawling deeper and deeper. I stepped back, slamming the door shut, but the glow from the carving seeped through the cracks. Then I heard it, a voice faint and crackling, like it was coming from an old radio. "Help me, it's so dark." It wasn't a stranger's voice, it was mine. That was a week ago. The door won't close anymore. Every time I go into the basement, it's slightly ajar and the tunnel seems darker, deeper. Last night I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Something is coming out of the tunnel, and it knows my name. If you're reading this, don't try to help me. Don't come looking for this house. I think the door was never meant for me. I think it was meant for you.
I just moved into an old house in the middle of nowhere. It was cheap, and I was desperate to get away from the city. I figured I could fix it up a bit, make it cozy, and live a quiet life. The basement was massive, filled with old furniture and boxes left by the previous owners, but there was this one door I couldn't open. It was rusted shut, and no amount of force would budge it. It was only a week ago that I finally decided to break it open. I grabbed a crowbar, thinking maybe there was a small storage space behind it. I was wrong. The door swung open with a loud creaking moan, and the smell hit me instantly. It was like rot mixed with something sickly sweet. I gagged, but my curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a flashlight and peered inside. The room was small, cramped, and the walls were lined with old yellowing photographs. They were of people. Hundreds of them, men, women, children, all staring blankly at the camera. But the thing that made my skin crawl? They were all missing their eyes. I wanted to leave right then, but something caught my eye. In the corner of the room was an old, dusty box. It was the only thing in there that wasn't covered in cobwebs. I shouldn't have opened it. Inside were dozens of small glass jars, each one containing something dark and shriveled. My flashlight flickered, and I thought I heard whispering, like tiny voices coming from the jars. I don't know why, but I picked one up, and when I looked closer, I realized what was inside. An eyeball. I dropped it, and it shattered on the floor. That's when the whispering turned into a low, guttural growl. I backed up, ready to run out of the basement, but the door slammed shut on its own. The lights in the room flickered and went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, but I could feel something moving, crawling around the room. I switched my flashlight back on, but it was dim now, barely lighting up the room. That's when I saw them. Faces, all around me, pressing against the walls, their eyeless sockets staring right at me. Their mouths moved, whispering, but it was like they were speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I thought I was going insane. I ran to the door and started banging on it, screaming, but the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. I turned around and one of the faces was inches away from mine. It smiled, a sick, twisted grin, and I could finally make out what it was saying. "Thank you for letting us out." The door burst open, and I stumbled out, sprinting up the stairs. I slammed the basement door shut and pushed a dresser in front of it, but I could still hear the whispers on the other side. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, clutching a kitchen knife, waiting for whatever was down there to try and get out. I called a locksmith the next day to have the door sealed shut, but when he arrived, he told me there was no basement door. I took him down there, and it was gone. Just a solid wall where the door used to be. I haven't gone back down there since. I hear things at night, scratching, like nails on a chalkboard, coming from beneath the floorboards. Sometimes I catch whispers, faint and distant, echoing through the house. And every morning, there's a new photograph slipped under my bedroom door. They're pictures of me, and in every one, my eyes are missing.